Your lungs would fail in under 6 minutes. Your bones would start losing density within weeks. And somewhere in a lab in Utah, scientists found a group of people whose bodies had already started to change, quietly, for 1,000 years. What if humans had to live entirely underwater? Not visit, not dive for an afternoon and surface again. Live there, sleep there, raise children there, forever, with no way back to dry land. Let's set the rules first. No boats, no submarines waiting to carry us home, no trips back to the surface, ever. Every human on Earth, all 8 billion of us, moved permanently below the waterline. Could our bodies actually handle it? Could our societies survive down there? And after enough generations, what would we even become? Let's start with the obvious problem. We can't breathe underwater, at all. Human lungs are built for gas exchange in air, and air is roughly 800 times less dense than water. Force water into a lung designed for oxygen and carbon dioxide, and the system fails almost instantly. Water floods the alveoli, the tiny air sacs where gas exchange happens, and oxygen simply can't cross into the blood fast enough. Within 4 to 6 minutes without air, brain cells begin dying. This isn't a small engineering inconvenience. It's the very first wall humanity would slam into. So picture that first generation. Humanity forced underwater, with nothing but the bodies evolution already gave us. Panic sets in almost immediately. Without external oxygen support, most people would drown within minutes, no matter how strong or determined they were. The only survivors would be the ones equipped with tanks, rebreathers, or sealed pressurized habitats. And this is where the story gets genuinely interesting, because humans have already tried living like this. Not forever, but long enough to learn exactly what breaks first. In the 1960s, the ocean explorer Jacques Cousteau ran a series of experiments called Conshelf. He built pressurized habitats on the seafloor off the coast of France, and later in the Red Sea, and had small teams of aquanauts live inside them for weeks at a stretch. They cooked meals underwater. They slept underwater. They worked long shifts outside their habitat, breathing carefully engineered gas mixtures instead of ordinary air. For a while, it worked. But it also revealed the cracks fast. Divers developed joint pain from constant pressure changes. Skin infections spread quickly in the humid, sealed air, and the deeper the habitat sat, the more dangerous the breathing mixture became, since certain gases turned toxic under enough pressure. Cousteau's teams proved humans could survive underwater with the right technology. They also proved exactly how fragile that survival really was, even for a handful of trained professionals. Now scale that up. Not a team of 6 aquanauts for a month. 8 billion people, forever, with no surface to escape to. The habitat problem alone becomes staggering. You'd need airtight, pressurized structures spread across the entire seafloor, engineered to withstand crushing water pressure that increases by roughly 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of depth. Go too deep, and the pressure difference between the inside and outside of a structure becomes powerful enough to implode solid steel in an instant. Every single home would essentially have to function like a submarine that could never resurface, monitored constantly, sealed permanently, one structural failure away from disaster. And it doesn't stop at shelter. What about food? Sunlight only penetrates useful amounts of water down to about 200 meters, a boundary oceanographers call the edge of the twilight zone. Past that depth, photosynthesis effectively stops working. No sunlight means no plants, the way farms grow them today. Agriculture as we know it becomes impossible almost everywhere. Humanity would have to rebuild its entire food system from scratch, leaning on kelp farming near the surface layers, filter-feeding shellfish, and algae grown under artificial light, burning enormous amounts of energy just to keep everyone fed, generation after generation. Then there's the psychological weight of it. No sky, no stars, no wind on your skin, just filtered light and the constant hum of machinery keeping you alive. Isolation researchers who study confined environments, from Antarctic winter overcruise to submarine deployments, have documented spikes in anxiety, depression, and irritability the longer people stay sealed away from open sky and natural daylight cycles. A permanent underwater civilization wouldn't just be an engineering challenge. It would be a psychological one, stretched across every single person alive. And think about what governs a world like that. On the surface, a single cracked window or a fire in your kitchen is a local emergency. Down here, a single sealed door left open, a single ruptured pipe, could flood an entire district in minutes. Every underwater settlement would need constant monitoring, redundant fail-safes, and strict rules about who's allowed to modify a structure at all. Freedom, in a world like this, would always be balanced against the fact that one mistake could kill hundreds of neighbors instantly. Entire legal and social systems would have to be rebuilt around that single, unforgiving fact. Energy becomes the next quiet crisis. Every breath of air, every degree of warmth, every watt of light powering the algae farms has to come from somewhere, since there's no wind, no open sun, and no easy fuel to burn in a sealed, pressurized world. Engineers would likely lean on geothermal vents along the ocean floor, or vast fields of tidal turbines harnessing the constant motion of deep currents. Run out of power for even a few hours, and an entire settlement's air supply, food supply, and structural pumps could fail all at once. It's a civilization with an off switch, and everyone would know exactly where it is. But here's where the real science gets fascinating. Because it turns out some humans have already started adapting to a life much closer to the water than the rest of us ever will. In 2018, geneticist Melissa Ilardo, then at the University of Copenhagen, studied a population called the Bajau, sometimes known as sea nomads, who live across parts of Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. For generations, the Bajau have spent much of their lives free diving for food, often reaching depths of over 60 meters on a single breath, with no tanks at all. Ilardo's research, published in the journal Cell, found that Bajau divers have spleens roughly 50% larger than neighboring non-diving populations. That matters, because a larger spleen stores extra oxygenated red blood cells and releases them into the bloodstream during a dive, essentially functioning like a built-in reserve oxygen tank. Her team even identified a specific gene variant, PDE10A, far more common among the Bajau, directly linked to that enlarged spleen size. This wasn't cultural training passed down through practice alone. This was the early beginning of genuine biological adaptation, built up over roughly 1,000 years of ocean-dependent life. Sit with that number for a second. 1,000 years, and the visible change is still just a bigger spleen. Not gills, not webbed hands, nothing close to science fiction. Now stretch that same evolutionary pressure across permanent, forced, planet-wide underwater living. Would humanity eventually evolve real aquatic adaptations, generation after generation? The way Ilardo's research suggests is already quietly happening in small, isolated pockets of our species today? Here's the science that actually answers that question. All humans, not just the Bajau, share something called the mammalian dive reflex. The moment your face touches cold water, your heart rate slows down automatically. Blood vessels in your limbs constrict to preserve oxygen for your core organs, and your spleen contracts to release stored red blood cells into circulation. Researchers have measured this reflex, triggering in infants just weeks old, which is part of why some scientists once floated the aquatic ape hypothesis, an idea popularized by writer Elaine Morgan, suggesting early humans may have spent a critical stretch of their evolution wading and foraging in shallow coastal water. Most anthropologists remain skeptical of that specific theory today, but the dive reflex itself is undeniably real, present in every one of us, and it's exactly the kind of raw material natural selection could keep building on, if the pressure to adapt lasted long enough. So here's the honest, escalating truth. In year one, we'd need tanks, sealed habitats, and carefully engineered gas mixtures just to survive a single day. In generation 10, we might start seeing Bajau-style adaptations spreading globally. Larger spleens, longer breath-holding capacity, sharper cold water reflexes passed down through families. But true gills? A body that pulls dissolved oxygen directly from seawater the way a fish does? That would require something evolution has never actually delivered to any mammal. Not once, in over 200 million years since mammals and fish split apart on the tree of life. Whales and dolphins didn't grow gills when their ancestors returned to the ocean roughly 50 million years ago. They kept lungs, and instead evolved to hold their breath for up to 2 hours at a time. That's very likely the ceiling for us too, not gills. Just extraordinarily efficient lungs and oxygen storage, layered on top of engineering we'd have to build ourselves. Which brings us to the twist hiding underneath this entire question. The answer to whether humans could live entirely underwater isn't really about biology at all. It's about technology outrunning evolution every single time. Long before any meaningful genetic adaptation could spread across a global population, permanent pressurized habitats, engineered food chains, and artificial breathing systems would already be doing the actual survival work. Day one, year one, forever. The Bajau didn't evolve gills either. After a full 1,000 years of relentless pressure, they evolved a slightly bigger internal oxygen tank and leaned hard on skill, culture, and free diving technique layered on top of that small biological edge. A fully submerged global civilization would very likely follow the exact same pattern, just built with steel, algae farms, and rebreathers instead of ancestral technique passed from parent to child. There's a modern mirror hiding in all of this, and it's closer than you might think. As sea levels rise from melting ice sheets and warming oceans, engineers today are already designing floating cities, underwater research stations, and pressurized habitats for exactly the kind of world this thought experiment imagines. Some low-lying coastal nations are actively planning for a future where dry land simply isn't guaranteed to stay available. The Bajau didn't choose the ocean because it was easy. They adapted because their environment demanded it, and that demand slowly reshaped their bodies over centuries of continuous pressure. We may be standing at the very beginning of a similar demand ourselves, just moving at the speed of rising water instead of ancient migration. Think about that the next time you watch the tide come in a little farther than it used to. It's easy to treat that as background noise, a slow, distant statistic on a news chart. But somewhere out there, a small population of freedivers is already carrying a bigger spleen than the rest of us, proof that the ocean can, quite literally, get written into a body over time. Maybe we won't ever need to move underwater completely, but if we ever did, the blueprint wouldn't come from science fiction. It would come from steel, from algae, and from 1,000 years of people who already learned to hold the sea a little closer than the rest of us ever have. So could humans really live entirely underwater? Not by growing gills, not within any of our lifetimes, and probably not within our children's either. But between Cousteau's fragile steel habitats and the Bajau's quietly evolving spleens, we already have the two working pieces of the answer laid out in front of us. Technology built to survive the pressure, and biology slowly, stubbornly bending toward the water, one generation at a time. The ocean was never really asking if we could join it. It was just waiting to see how long it would take us to try.